They found the first journal in a rust-crusted ammunition box buried beneath the half-collapsed floorboards of an abandoned house on Maryland's eastern shore. A hurricane had torn through the coast only weeks earlier, and the cleanup crews were used to finding strange storm-shredded relics. Bicycles lodged into tree trunks, boats flung a mile inland, even a mailbox from Delaware that somehow ended up in a school parking lot. But nothing prepared them for the journal. Nothing prepared them for the 1,000 pages of cramped handwriting, signed only with the initials ETH, and dated between 1770 and 1826. At first, it looked like the ramblings of a man too lonely or too old to trust his own memory. Tales of spies buried inside the heart of British command, of slaves who escaped not simply through the Underground Railroad, but through a cryptic communication network older than the colonies themselves, of a revolutionary conspiracy the founders never dared to put on parchment. But the more the historians read, the more the journal's impossible claims began matching obscure records scattered across early American archives. And that is how the story begins. Not with the founding fathers, not with the drum of muskets at Lexington, but with an orphan boy standing barefoot in the mud behind a Boston print shop, the smell of ink staining the winter air, unaware that he would one day be the single most important person in American history, whose name no textbook had ever recorded. His real name was Elias Thorne Hathaway, though for most of his life he lived under false identities. He was born in 1760 to a widowed mother who died before he could form a memory of her face. Elias never described her beyond a single line in the journal. She had a voice that sounded as if it carried secrets. No relatives claimed him, no parish wanted the burden, and so the boy drifted into the underbelly of colonial Boston, sleeping beneath tavern porches, running errands for drunks, stealing bread from horse carts, and learning too quickly that the world rewarded silence more often than it rewarded truth. The print shop took him in by chance, on a freezing night when the harbor wind howled like the coastline itself was cracking apart. Elias curled into the alley behind the shop, seeking warmth from the wall's blistering heat. Inside, the press was running non-stop, hammering out pamphlets criticizing a new round of British taxes. The shop owner, Nathaniel Merriweather, stepped outside to dump a bucket of inky water and nearly tripped over the boy. "Get up," he ordered, but Elias didn't move. Nathaniel sighed, hauled him to his feet, and took him inside. Elias would later write, "It was the first warm room I had entered in weeks. I felt thawed back into existence." Nathaniel put him to work almost immediately, not out of charity, but out of practicality. The shop needed someone nimble enough to fetch paper stacks, scrub type blocks, sweep metal filings, and load ink without complaint. Elias, small, sharp-eyed, and silent, was perfect. From that print shop, he witnessed the simmering fury of the colonies long before war erupted. He listened as fishermen, merchant captains, and merchants whispered about liberty between gulps of ale. He watched Samuel Adams argue fiercely with men who were too afraid to put their names on dissenting pamphlets. He saw secret meetings, coded messages disguised inside advertisements, and letters that changed hands before being burned to ash. At 14, Elias could already spot a British informant by the way he read a pamphlet, too slowly, too intently, as if memorizing more than words. This talent did not go unnoticed. One snowy morning in 1774, a man walked into the shop wearing a charcoal gray overcoat, its buttons carved from bone. Elias saw immediately what no one else did. The man's eyes never stopped moving. They flicked across signs, posters, ink stains, the warped dents in the floorboards, cataloging everything. When their eyes met, the man gave the faintest nod. Hours later, while folding printed broadsides, Elias discovered a small scrap of parchment slipped beneath the press handle. On it was a single sentence: "Tonight at the wharf, bring no one." That night, he stood beneath the creaking shadows of docked ships as the gray-coated man emerged from the mist. "My name," the stranger said quietly, "is Lysander Cobb. You don't know me, but your country may depend upon you." Elias nearly laughed. What country? America was still a fracturing idea. But Lysander spoke before Elias could answer. "You see things, you hear things, and you know when to keep silent. That makes you valuable." To Elias's astonishment, the man then revealed what no printed pamphlet had ever dared to name out loud: a covert intelligence network forming across the colonies, one that operated years before Washington commanded an army, a network of printers, innkeepers, dock workers, farm hands, escaped slaves, indigenous scouts, and runaway apprentices, people who moved invisibly through the machinery of everyday life. They called themselves the Archive. "We gather the stories the powerful wish to bury," Lysander said, "because controlling history is the first step to controlling the future." Elias did not agree immediately, but 2 weeks later, when British soldiers raided the print shop and dragged Nathaniel into the street for questioning, the decision made itself. Elias slipped his few belongings into a satchel and vanished into the night, straight into the arms of the Archive. The journal documents everything that followed, often in excruciating detail. The secret routes through Native American territories, the codes carved into fence posts, the taverns that hid printing presses in their basements, the unnamed enslaved couriers who memorized messages as poems so no paper ever needed to be carried. Elias wrote of nights riding through unfamiliar forests with the hoots of owls masking the hoofbeats of pursuing soldiers. He described men he admired who died in cellars beneath redcoat boots, and women who deceived British officers so convincingly that entire regiments marched in the wrong direction. The Archive grew, but so did the danger. In 1775, when the first shots of the Revolutionary War crackled across Lexington Green, Elias was already deep inside the British command structure, posing as a servant, sweeping floors, delivering trays to officers, all while absorbing whispered strategies and stolen letters. He was 19 the first time he altered the course of a battle, slipping a forged message into the pocket of a British courier whose drunken stumbling ensured the fake orders reached the wrong hands. Historians long wondered how Washington's ragtag militia managed to outmaneuver the British during certain improbable retreats. Elias's journal finally answered the question. But the most astonishing part came years later, after the war ended, when the United States, raw, broke, triumphant, and deeply uncertain of its future, expected the great intelligence network to dissolve. Instead, it expanded, because the founders, for all their lofty rhetoric, feared something far more destabilizing than British muskets, the idea that the new American Republic could devour itself from within. Elias became the quiet thread holding together a country that did not yet know his name. He passed messages between Jefferson and frontier scouts, warning of territorial uprisings. He infiltrated slave trading rings in Virginia to document atrocities that even abolitionists refused to print. He chronicled epidemics sweeping through port cities, political deals struck behind locked doors, and plots by European powers hungry to fracture the new United States before it could solidify. He did all this while living in the shadows. But the most unbelievable section of the journal, the part historians refused to accept until multiple corroborating documents surfaced, came in 1803, the year of the Louisiana Purchase. According to Elias, the purchase was not merely a bargain between Jefferson and Napoleon. It was the result of a coded negotiation carried out through smugglers, scientists, and indigenous intermediaries. There were secret maps,
forgotten expeditions, and a French admiral who attempted to sabotage the deal by sinking an American cargo ship carrying classified correspondence. Elias was on board that ship. His survival, as he wrote, was a matter of pure accident and foolish courage. He washed ashore in Florida, half dead, rescued by members of the Seminole Nation, who had known about the archive long before the founders. From them he learned the vast land America had purchased was not empty, not directionless, not waiting to be shaped by the East, but full of civilizations whose history stretched thousands of years deeper than anything written in Philadelphia. Those pages were the most heartbreaking in the journal. Elias documenting a world already beginning to vanish under the expansion of the new republic he had helped protect. The final years of his writings, covering the War of 1812, the burning of Washington, the political fractures under Monroe, read like a man aging before his time. But one line appears again and again. These stories must be kept alive. America is not the tale told in its marble monuments, but the tale written in the margins. Elias died in 1826, the same year as Jefferson and Adams, but his death went unnoticed outside his small circle. His burial marker, if there was one, was lost generations ago. His journal, however, survived hurricanes, wars, and centuries of silence before reappearing in that ruined Maryland house. And this is the story recorded within those 1,000 pages.